Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have an absolutely buzzing show for you today. We start out talking about a bee activation. Yes, babies, moms, dads, parents, people in the halls of the U.S. Capitol in bee costumes. Find out why by listening. It was a powerful moment. After that, we dive into celebrating Pride Month with Parenting with Pride, a new resource set for you. We find out how you can get it and what's in it. Next up, we talk with the American Association of People with Disabilities about the extremely bad impact of Medicaid cuts if they go through, as Republicans in the House and Senate and Donald Trump are trying to do, and how to rise up to stop them. And we close the show talking with one of my favorite organizations, IWPR, the Institute for Women's Policy Research, about how data can bring us together. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by the one, the only, the super Felicia Burnett, National Director of Storytelling, Innovations, and Healthcare. And she, right now, is in her car. She is driving back from Washington, D.C., and she is driving back from a great bee activation. And now people are like, wait, Kristen, what are you talking about bees? Felicia, what happened with the bees?
Yeah, hi, Kristen. Thanks for having me. We had an enormous bee activation on the Hill yesterday. We had moms and kids, just around 100 people show up in the Hart Building. We dressed up with bees. The kids were in bee costumes. The parents had bee t-shirts and antennas. And we kind of swarmed the Capitol or swarmed the Senate offices in order to let the U.S. senators know that moms and kids are watching, and we want them to vote no on the big bad betrayal of families that is this budget bill.
I was so surprised by how effective it was. Now, sometimes Moms Rising has ideas like, oh, we're going to make something fun for families by having, cute little costumes that we can give to babies and kids, in this instance, bee costumes, and, bee antennas and special bee squad shirts for moms. This was so effective. Why was it effective? We had storybooks that included the direct impacts on families, moms, dads, people, parents, kids, if the House and Senate passed that Republican big bad betrayal bill. That's a betrayal of our families. It's a betrayal of our economy. And then we had those stories in the storybook, and we were able to deliver them to every single office of every single Republican senator. So we're pushing for no votes on this bill. And why is that important? What's in the bill that we need to delete from the idea of passing?
Well, like you said, there were stories that we delivered. And the reason we were delivering these stories is because we need to let senators know that the massive cuts, they have over $860 billion in cuts to Medicaid, over $200 billion in cuts to the ACA. It's going to kick 16 million people off of their healthcare coverage. It will cause an estimated 50,000 more deaths per year with these cuts. Not to mention all of the cuts to nutrition and education and everything else that is bad for families in the bill. So we wanted to bring stories to let the senators know how this bill is going to affect families and how bad of a deal it is for families across the country. It is a true betrayal of families across the country and what they promised for families.
It is definitely a betrayal. So you all, now you might be like, Mom's Rising, what are you doing? MRI studies of the brain show that when people are in partisan lock in their mindset, they're like, oh, I don't like this thing because Democrats like it, or I don't like this thing because Republicans like it. That's partisan lock. When people are in partisan lock in their brains, there's very few things they can break through. One of those things is humor. Humor can break through a partisan lock and get you back to logic. Another thing along the way is story. So we mixed humor and story and went directly to the elected leaders, this time the U.S. senators, who are teetering on the edge of voting for it and voting against this. In this instance, every single Democratic senator is standing up for everybody to have access to health care. They're standing up for Medicaid. They're standing up for the Affordable Care Act, also known as the ACA. They're standing up against cuts that will close hospitals of all sizes. Democrats are with us. They're standing up for SNAP. Republicans, not so much. So that's why we brought the humor to break through that partisan lock as a strategy. That's why we brought the stories to break through that partisan lock as a strategy. And you know what? The headlines the day after this activation, not just because of Moms Rising, but because of many organizations, were that this ridiculous budget proposal of doom, the reconciliation package, is teetering on the edge of not passing. And can I tell you what I did? I did a happy dance. Did you see the headlines, Felicia?
Absolutely. And you're so right, Kristen. It was so interesting going into Republican Senate offices with children and parents dressed as bees and see the smiles on their face and deliver stories and be able to kind of break through the tension in the Senate buildings yesterday was palpable. You could feel it. I know I could feel it. And it was really nice to be able to walk into an office with a little bit of humor and powerful stories and be able to kind of break through that tension, that partisan mindset, and just have a conversation face to face. It is really hard to not put a smile on your face when an adorable baby dressed as a bee comes into your office to deliver stories. So I definitely feel like it was an incredibly effective effort. And it's not just the folks on the Hill, the Moms Rising members on the Hill, it's also the tens of thousands of people all across the country who have submitted stories to Moms Rising to speak out against this bill and to let our leaders know how these policies will impact their families. So it's just a wonderful formula for folks across the country to send their stories into Moms Rising, and then for us to compile a set of those into a storybook and be able to have moms who are close to the Hill go in and be that mouthpiece for parents across the country to be able to bring those stories into offices and make even staffers in Republican offices, while we're walking in and saying, please don't vote for this bill, smile and actually have a human to human conversation, which is really nice.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things is that what we did this time is we have DC, Maryland, Virginia moms being mom ambassadors, as Felicia said, representing the millions of moms who can't be in Washington, D.C. in this time of significant crisis, but be there representing and actually delivering the stories, delivering the petition signatures, delivering what's happening around the country. And I saw some differences be made. So this is the other thing. We have several Republican senators who are on the line, on the edge of like, maybe I won't vote for this. And I was so heartened by the warm embrace that we got in many of those Republican Senate offices who are sort of saying, oh, yeah, I'm actually kind of with you on this one. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. Because we only need about 3. And we have a little bit more than 3 who are teetering on the edge. So sharing your story and having a moment to, really focus on the true impact of what gutting things like Medicaid would actually do is actually making a difference. So this is the part I wanted to get to. Sometimes people are like, it doesn't matter if I share my story. It doesn't matter if I call. It doesn't matter if I do these things. It's actually making a difference. We can see it making a difference in real time. What are your thoughts on that, Felicia?
1,000,000%. We had the stories in the storybooks, but then also so many of the parents who came to the Hill yesterday also have stories of their own. So while we're going around and delivering these stories, so many parents are able to also come in and share their personal story with the staffers in the offices and let them know that they're not just a lobbyist being paid to be there to advocate. They are actually a parent and a constituent who has a real connection to the policy to be able to bring in the stories and voices of parents across the country with a story of their own to make that message even more powerful. And it makes a huge difference. It does really make a difference. Every single story that is shared, every petition that is signed, every phone call that is made, you may feel like one single action doesn't make a difference, but when we all bring our voices together and speak in unison, the impact can be so, so powerful.
So powerful. And we've seen this power before, Felicia and I, because in the first Trump time that he was president, he and the Republican leadership in the House and the Republican leadership in the Senate all wanted to gut the Affordable Care Act and push tens of millions of people off healthcare. This is like Groundhog's Day of doom happening here. But more than 52 times, we stood up, we shared our stories, we brought people forward, we did not give up. opened avenues for people's voices to be heard, and many other organizations did as well. And we won. We won more than 52 times. So for people who are looking at the newspaper, looking at the headlines, looking at what's happening and thinking, oh, I'm going to pre-give up, don't give up, you all. It's not over till it's over, and it's never fully over. We are out there pushing, persisting, and making progress. And the other way that we're making progress is shifting the narrative. So a bunch of polls have come out showing that Democrats and Republicans alike do not like the big bad betrayal budget bill that's being pushed by Trump and Republican leadership. Also, we have seen that more and more people are rising in red and blue and purple states. And we also saw this morning lots of pictures of moms in bee outfits in places like the Boston Globe, the Seattle Times, all over the place saying, you know, Trump's proposal is stinging families. So we're also seeing narrative shifting is happening with the imagery of moms and families and, you know, bee outfits. And what is your take on that, Felicia?
Oh my goodness. So we know that this bill is going to impact everyone in all 50 states, red states, blue states, Democrats, Republicans. We know that this bill, especially the healthcare cuts, will have a huge impact on every community across the country. I believe the number is 338 rural hospitals are estimated to close because of the Medicaid cuts alone, not to mention all of the cuts in services, whether governors have to choose to cut healthcare because of the Medicaid cuts, or they may choose to switch over and cut more out of education or out of public safety or infrastructure to make up for these cuts in Medicaid. We know that these cuts are going to impact everyone across the entire country. It does not matter your political party. It does not matter what state you're from. We know that this is going to have a huge impact on every community across the country.
It is a big deal. We only have a couple minutes left. What should people do now?
Well, we need people to continue speaking out. You can call your senators, you can call your members of Congress as many times as you want, call them every single day. And also, don't forget, your governor has a lot at stake in this. So please also call your governor and your state lawmakers and ask them to reach out to the members of Congress for your state, to reach out to your senators and let them know that they are opposed to the cuts in this bill, because what will happen is with these massive cuts, our state lawmakers, our governors are going to have to make incredibly difficult decisions come 2026 when these cuts go through, and have to make choices about what to cut out of their state budgets because the federal portion of Medicaid has been cut so drastically.
And we only have 30 seconds left. Do you have 30 seconds of what's giving you hope?
Oh, what's giving me hope is all the storytellers. People are coming out of every corner of the US to be able to share their stories about the impact that Medicaid has made on them personally, what impact SNAP has made for them and their families. People speaking out in unison and sharing their stories and sharing their experience and keeping at it, continuing to call their lawmakers, continuing to talk with their community members, their family members, people who may not understand the impacts of this bill, having those conversations and watching all of these micro actions combine to make a huge tsunami of change across the country is what's giving me hope.
Thank you so much, Felicia, for being on. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for leading, changing, and building hope. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And safe driving.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kristen.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, but stick around. We'll be right back with our next guest talking about parenting with pride. Lots of resources for you. We'll be back in a quick moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a spectacular, say that 20 times fast, and it will be true. Hold, please, undoing. Okay. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have an amazing guest for you right now. I'm so thrilled that there is time for us to hear from Nadine Smith of Equality Florida. She is the CEO. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month. And let's talk about what is happening. Can you tell us about your organization's amazing and very needed programs? Parenting with Pride. We love it.
Yes.
What does the Parenting with Pride offer the LGBTQ plus community, and all those who love queer, trans, and gender expansive kids and adults. This is such a good time to talk about it.
Well, it is. And of course, Florida has been the front line for these hateful attacks, not just on the LGBTQ community, but on access to health care across the board, a book bans, censorship, government intrusion, Moms for Liberty cosplaying as concerned parents when really they're just political operatives funded by right-wing think tanks, et cetera, et cetera. And so what that has amounted to is an all-out assault on public education using the LGBTQ community, trans kids in particular, as a battering ram to attempt to demolish public schools and to install, right-wing takeover. And it's been, it's been horrible to witness, but it's also been inspiring to see the pushback. And part of that pushback has been partnering with groups like Moms Rising to create Parenting with Pride. And it really sprung out of a need that we saw from parents who are reaching out saying, school has become hostile for my kid. Books that my child used to have in their classroom have been removed. Their favorite teacher has been fired, for standing up on their behalf. Hostility towards our family. So all of these things, and these weren't necessarily parents who considered themselves political at all. They were parents reacting out of a need to protect their kids. And so what started as a few dozen families in this past year, we've had over 4,000 families turn out for 500 some odd school board meetings across the state. And what that has meant is a pushback on this hateful agenda. We've seen Moms for Liberty, 72% of candidates lost in the last election. In fact, in many ways, that's right. In many ways, Moms for Liberty and Ron DeSantis became such a toxic brand when it came to what was going on in school boards that there were candidates begging them not to give them an endorsement, and we can see why. So I think that there are a lot of parents waking up to the fact that their kids are being used as political props, and they're not willing to be silent about it anymore.
I love what you said. I can't remember the exact wording, but about it being a very terrible time, but also kind of a hopeful time as you see a growing movement in Florida. And I've seen that in Moms Rising. I don't know if we've talked about this, but we did a density analysis of where are our members the most dense. And Florida and Texas were among the most dense in terms of number of members in the country. And I thought about it for a minute, and it's because there's been a disaster after disaster after disaster after disaster in Florida. I mean, listeners, Florida tried to bring back child labor. I mean, what is happening in Florida? I do not know, right? Like, there's been so many disasters. But at the same time, as you were noting, with all of these disasters, so many moms, dads, parents, and people have said, this is not where we want to live. We don't want to live in a place of disaster after disaster. We're coming together. We're going to fight locally, and we're going to win locally. What are the biggest sort of fights that you're seeing happening in Florida right now? And I want to ask that question framed in, I was just in Washington, D.C., and in what we call the big bad betrayal bill, which is the Republican reconciliation package that Donald Trump is also pushing forward, there is this awful provision for vouchering public schools, which sometimes people think, oh, that is great at first, but actually Florida tried it. It was a terrible failure. It was like a siphon out of Florida schools into private pockets of people who owned for-profit schools, and it was horrible. So I'm asking this, like, what's happening right now in Florida? Because sometimes Florida seems to be a testing ground also of very terrible ideas that end up in Washington, D.C. So what do we need to be looking out for?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, for all of these things, when it comes to this administration here in Florida and the one in Washington, follow the money. Somebody's looking to raid the public coffers. Somebody is looking to make a buck. And so, yeah, we saw it. We see it in Florida where, just match up how many Republican lawmakers actually run the schools, the private schools that benefit from vouchers. And you have to understand that most people support public education because they understand that public education is the one place where we make a commitment to educate everyone, regardless of race, of class, of financial ability, of disability, of sexual orientation, of gender identity. That's not the commitment that these other schools make. They get to say, we don't take your kind here, or you're bringing down our numbers, so we're going to cut you out of the equation. Public school doesn't do that. And so, yes, they want to raid the public coffers. Once they look at the billions of dollars that move through public education, they want a taste. And so they don't care whether they completely gut public education as long as they come out with money in their pockets.
And as public education in Florida is being gutted by testing this voucher disaster, the resources that you have in Parenting with Pride become so much more important, so much more needed. And people, I want you to know where to go. Parenting with Pride, it's Pride Month. Everybody needs to go here. It's actually called parentingwithpride.org. Again, parentingwithpride.org. When you go there are so many resources. There's anti-bullying resources, there's books resources, there's legal support resources, there's parent-to-parent resources, student-to-student resources, teacher-to-teacher resources, transgender resources, youth resources. And I love the framing on the page, which I will read for listeners if you all don't mind, which is this website will serve as a pipeline for parents and families to create communities where every LGBTQ plus child feels safe, affirmed, and loved. Our goal is to empower the parents of Florida by offering the tools such as monthly webinars, links to resources, and a direct connection to our support to get you the assistant you need for your child to grow and thrive. Hello, standing ovation. When I think about celebrating Pride Month, I am celebrating this. You all, it is parentingwithpride.org. There's lots of get help buttons on here. It's easy to navigate. What has been the most popular? And would you say that most parents are like me, where they see it and they're like, yes, finally, I need this resource.
Yeah.
And let me celebrate this.
Yeah.
I'll hold a party about it, during
Yeah.
Pride Month.
Well, I would say it runs the gamut. Parents who are just absolutely relieved that there are people who understand what they're going through, what they're doing to protect their kid, and that we have expertise. We've spent years training more than 40,000, school district employees, because we know that if a child just has one supportive voice in their life, it can make all of the difference in the world between a kid that drops out and a kid that's thriving. And so for us, we have deep roots in school districts to say you have an obligation to respect every family and to protect every student. And we want to help you meet that standard. And so, yeah, we get a lot of parents who are just really, really happy. We also get parents who they have been buffeted by all of this disinformation, misinformation, lies, hate. And to be crystal clear, everyone needs to understand that the attack on the LGBTQ community, trans kids and their families in particular, is driven by right-wing think tanks who, you can look at I think it's the April 17th, 2023 New York Times article. I'm quoted in there, but the quote I really want to draw your attention to is in the very first paragraph, where the head of this right-wing think tank, American Principles Project, I believe it's called, basically says marriage equality, which we're celebrating this month as well, marriage equality stopped being a reliable political wedge issue, and we had to come up with something else. So we threw everything against the wall. And to our amazement, what stuck was the transgender issue, because people did not know a lot about it, and we knew we could work with it, which means we knew we could weaponize fear, not into curiosity, but ignorance into fear. And we could use that fear to whip up our base and go after public schools. And that's precisely what they have been doing. And so we also get families who've kind of crawled through that filthy pipeline of terrible lies, who are just saying, I just want information. I don't know where I stand, but I need to get out of this echo chamber because this is my kid. And so the things they're saying about my child don't add up. So we don't assume that people come as 100% right there for their kid. We assume they arrive with questions, and we're going to give them the best quality answers we can give them. We're going to give them support. We're going to connect them with other parents who are going through and experiencing the same things they're experiencing, so that they can speak honestly and openly and get their questions answered, and they can be met where they are, not, feel uncomfortable because they've got, some questions that they fear might not be popular to ask. We want those questions because that's the way you get people to the information they need to look after their kid and not be buffeted by all of this really toxic hatred. And so for us, it's like, come as you are, arrive as the cheerleader, thrilled that you have resources, or arrive with your questions, expecting to get honest answers and to be around people who know what it is that you are navigating as well.
Parentingwithpride.org, people, go there. I have a follow-up question. You mentioned that people come in whatever emotional experience they're having in the moment, and there is a lot of fear, as you mentioned. So for parents of loved ones who are trans, non-binary, and gender expansive youth who are feeling really, really scared right now about the way that the right wing is targeting transgender youth as a scapegoat, ridiculously, for their overarching agenda to police and control gender sexuality, to get rid of healthcare, to get rid of self-determination. What do you want to say to those parents and those kids and those people? What advice or guidance do you have?
Well, the thing I would say is reach out because we're here for you. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to meet you wherever you are. We're here to connect you with other parents who can be your support network, but also understand that every single time you open your mouth to speak on behalf of your child, you make a difference. The reason that we've been able to thwart so much of what Moms for Liberty has been attempting to do was because these are real parents with kids in that school system, not right-wing operatives cosplaying as concerned parents, but actual parents. And there's nothing that exposes a phony than standing next to the real McCoy. And so when parents show up, even the ones that don't speak, are able to have a huge influence. And sometimes if you just read the headlines, you'll think, we're up against so much. We win when parents show up, when parents speak. And it's not, you don't have to have the most perfect talking points. In fact, don't have talking points. Just speak from your heart. Speak about what brought you to that space. And honestly, we don't pressure people. If you call us and you say, hey, this is happening to my kid in our school, then somebody on our team is going to reach out to you. They're going to make sure that you get the information you need. If it's a meeting with us with the school district that will resolve the issue, that will happen. But what happens is parents go, especially after we've helped them, they go, okay, well, why did the school think they needed to do that? Well, there's a school board meeting where these decisions get made. And if you want to go, we'll show you what it takes. And maybe they go to that school board meeting and they think they're not going to say a word, but now they're listening to a school board debate the humanity of their child. And suddenly people who never thought they would speak in public are standing up at the podium telling these people to stop hurting their kid. And then they ask, why did the school board think it needed to do this? Well, come to Tallahassee with us, and we'll show you the people who think they have the right to override your best judgment for your child and restrict your kid's ability to get health care and take out books that affirm the existence of kids like your kid and families like your family. Come tell them why what they are doing is wrong and why you oppose it. And pretty soon you have parents coming to Tallahassee who never thought of themselves as political and never thought they'd be making a trip to Tallahassee. But that's how it happens, not because they're pressured, but because they begin to follow the thread of where the harm that's being inflicted on their kid is coming from.
And that's hope in motion, people rising up, speaking out, making changes, being heard, and something I think to celebrate this Pride Month, people rising up. Would
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about Florida as the front line of the attack, but it's also the blueprint for the resistance. And we tell people you've got to throw sand in the machinery at every chance you get. Give no ground, because one of those grains of sand, one of those voices that thinks they don't matter, will be the one that breaks the machine. And that's why we show up everywhere, at every school board meeting, at every legislative hearing, at every state agency that's been weaponized to do harm to us. We show up because we know that we're going to pour sand in that machine until it breaks.
Thank you so much for all you do. And listeners, go to parentingwithpride.org. Get involved, stay involved, support, and let's celebrate Pride Month by celebrating parenting with pride. Thank you so much, Nadine Smith.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks, Moms Rising.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, we're talking with the American Association of People with Disabilities about how the Republican proposed cuts to Medicaid are going to have disastrous impacts in communities across America. We'll be back in just a quick moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a wonderful guest with us right now, Maria Town, who is president and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristen. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here during a depressing / exciting / hopeful / furious time. All the things. So right now we have a bill that has been proposed by Republican leadership, has been proposed by the Republican leadership in the House, Republican leadership in the Senate, and pushed by Donald Trump. We at Moms Rising are calling it the big bad budget betrayal bill. And in fact, we had some bees.
Yes, I heard buzz. I heard lots of buzzing on the Hill.
We had lots of bees. But that's another story for a different segment. In this bill, there are dramatic cuts to Medicaid that are happening in different ways in the House bill and in the Senate bill. And listeners, this is, as we are talking about this today, a situation that is very much in flux. So by the time you listen to this, what we're talking about could be even a little bit more different than we're talking about right now, because it's literally changing moment by moment, second by second, minute by minute. But what isn't changing is that the House Republicans, the Senate Republicans, and Donald Trump are going after Medicaid. Medicaid covers so much: 40% of births, more than 60% of people in nursing homes, and 1 in 3 people with disabilities. So I really wanted to talk about what's at stake with people with disabilities in this disastrous target that has been put on Medicaid.
There is so much at stake. Kristen, like you said, Medicaid covers healthcare for 1 in 3 people with disabilities. And when we say that, we're talking about kids and adults and older adults. Like, disability happens across the lifespan. So when we talk Medicaid and disability, we are not just talking about kind of middle-aged people like me with disabilities. We are talking about everybody across the lifespan. And Medicaid helps cover speech therapy in schools for disabled kids. It helps cover home and community-based services for disabled kids, adults, and older adults. And importantly, home and community-based services are optional. Okay, so when states are faced with budget crises, which they will be because of these Medicaid cuts, the first things to go are optional services, which means home and community-based services. Now, we know that people want to live and age at home. They want to stay connected to the communities that they love. And if these dollars get cut, we will see a rise in institutionalization that disabled people have fought so hard against for literally like centuries. We will see people die. And I'm not being hyperbolic, like that is just the truth. And we're going to see kids not being able to go to schools, and we're going to see families struggle even more than they already are right now, because in reality, what we need is more investment in Medicaid, not less.
100%. I mean, one of the things that's making me really angry, among many, is that there's this weird conversation going on with Republicans where they're like, I am not going to cut Medicaid. I'm just going to put work requirements. And to that, my head just about explodes. Because while that idea might possibly in some audiences poll well, what it means in reality is something that a lot of people have not even pondered. And that's why I started out with, who's having Medicaid? 40% of people who are giving birth, more than 60% of people in nursing homes, and 1 in 3 people with disabilities. So to the proposal that, we're just going to put work requirements on, I'm like, are you going to make great grandma go to work? Like, what are you talking about? So what is your take on this ridiculous, we're not cutting Medicaid, we're just doing work requirements, and how preposterous that is when you get to the nuts and bolts of what this program actually does and means?
So a couple of things. Sometimes they say that people with disabilities won't be included in the work requirements, right? And that's not enough. The reality of disability is that a lot of times most people who are disabled aren't identified as such, and there's not a common definition of disability in Medicaid. And I think it's really important for people to hear that when we talk about disability, we're talking everything from cerebral palsy, like I have, to Crohn's disease, to cancer. And there is particularly people with chronic health conditions like lupus, which I know we've talked about your experiences with that. It can be really hard for them to keep connected to a solid job. And so really what work requirements are job loss penalties. And when someone loses their job or loses their employment, they lose their Medicaid. And we know that even if Congress says disabled people will be excluded from these job loss penalties, these work requirements, these paperwork requirements, disabled people will be harmed. And we've seen in the states that have introduced these kinds of programs that actually there's no positive impact on employment. It just makes it harder for people to get the things that they need to survive. And what the administrative burden of work requirements was create another way for the government to cut people away from their benefits, because there's these new eligibility requirements. You have to like recertify all the time, and people miss deadlines, or the paperwork is confusing and it doesn't make sense, and it makes it even harder to get the benefits you need.
100%. I'm so glad you brought up that some states have actually tried this ridiculous, preposterous idea of, quote, work requirements. And I put it in quote because it is really not related to any reality. When you look at the work requirement written down on paper as policy, it does not match the reality of people's lives or who is needing and using Medicaid. And so when we're talking about that, what you just brought up, which I want to underscore, is that some states have tried this idea. And it was a dramatic failure. It actually ended up costing the states more to try to like research and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
people who qualified or didn't qualify than if they hadn't had the requirements. Because guess what? It turns out that people are actually pretty responsible. People who can work are often usually working. People enjoy
Yes.
food on the table and a roof over their head, turns out. And to do that, oftentimes you need to be, in fact, usually in the labor force in some way, shape, or form. So like, if people can work, they're usually working. And so that's what we found out from the state experiments, which means that what's happening in Congress with the Republicans is it is a purposeful pushing out of a policy to cut Medicaid while they're saying they're not cutting Medicaid, and putting through a provision that they know won't work. And I'm so mad about that. What are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. And I think it is really important to highlight that Medicaid actually makes work and employment possible for a lot of people with disabilities. One of the other services that Medicaid funds is supported employment, job coaches. And so if you're putting these job loss penalties, work requirements, whatever you want to say, onto Medicaid, it actually defeats part of the point of Medicaid itself. And if we actually wanted to make it possible for more people to get to work and to like contribute to our economy in a meaningful way, we actually know what policies need to be pursued in order to make that happen. Paid family leave, right? We need to increase the asset limit for Social Security so that disabled people and other people who receive public benefits aren't penalized for working and trying to save even a little bit of money so that they can plan for their future. If what Congress wants is to have more Americans working in jobs, I know that Moms Rising and AAPD together have a whole plan for them. They should just listen to us.
Exactly. And I want to go back to this paperwork issue. So there's also this idea that, okay, we're just going to have like stricter paperwork. I don't know what the Republicans are calling it right now. Some fancy name. We'll try to remember what that is. But it's basically stricter paperwork. And it's the total intent of it is to push people off of Medicaid through paperwork requirements. So the majority of people, when we look at what's happening in the United States of America, 80% of low-wage workers don't have a single paid sick day if they are sick. So when are you going to have time to go do paperwork? Tell me this, right? And so who is going to be disproportionately pushed out of programs that, as you noted, allow people to live, work, and thrive, like Medicaid? It's going to be people with disabilities, right? Because it's raising the hurdle even higher. It's so annoying, beyond annoying. It's infuriating. What are your thoughts?
And it's caregivers. Whether that is parents or siblings or, adult children, um, family members are going to have to spend so much time supporting their loved ones in navigating these burdensome paperwork requirements that, like, how are you going to tell your employer, oh, I need 3 hours off in the middle of the day so that I can be on the phone with my state health and human services agency because my brother or my child's benefits got cut needlessly. Like, that is the reality. And so there's going to be a ripple effect, not just for individuals who are direct recipients of these benefits, but really for whole families and communities that they're connected to. I um I will never forget when he was in pre-op for a transplant and I had to take off 2 days of work just to figure out what happened. And actually what happened is he was mailed forms, physical forms that he missed. He was so sick. He didn't fill them out, he didn't turn them in, and so they cut his Medicare. And so he couldn't get a transplant when one was available for him. We had to go through a whole process, get him re-enrolled, and then he became eligible for a transplant again. Stories like that will only become more common if these new these new proposals take effect.
So we need to raise our voices, people. We need to shout to the rooftops. We need to say, hello, Republican leadership and Donald Trump. We see through your weird proposals that aren't actually to help people, they're to harm people. We see when you say, oh, I'm not cutting Medicaid, but you put in these strange requirements, that's actually cutting Medicaid. I'm laughing, but really I want to yell and howl at the moon and primal scream thing here because it's so annoying. And so, what should people do and how can they get involved and support what you're doing at the American Association of People with Disabilities?
Well, at AAPD, we have created a Medicaid hub and we have action alerts, we have explainers. You can go to aapd.com/Medicaid and check all those out. If you would prefer to email your members of Congress, we have those tools. If you want to call your member of Congress or your senator, we have those tools as well. You know, I I truly believe that the Senate side, especially right now, we should not allow them to sleep. That's because they're going to be worried about losing their lives. This is not, the Trump administration is definitely not business as usual. And so we actually have to take that same spirit and push as hard as we can right now, to say we will not stand for this, not on our watch. And I just have to note, like, disabled people have fought so hard to exist in our communities. And if Medicaid is what makes that possible. So any cuts to Medicaid are wrong. And the Senate needs to hear that loud and clear.
So everybody call your 2 members of the Senate and say no cuts to Medicaid. And while you're on it, call your House member and say no cuts to Medicaid too, because this bill is going to bounce back and forth between the 2 bodies for a little while. So tell all federal leaders no cuts to Medicaid. Thank you so much for being on, Maria. Everybody, please join, support, get involved, and stay involved with American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD. Thank you so much, Maria. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, we are talking with IWPR, one of my favorite organizations, Institute for Women's Policy Research, about data and you. We'll be back in a quick moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have an amazing, spectacular, nation-lifting guest with us right now, Dr. Taylor with the Institute for Women's Policy Research, also known as IWPR. Welcome, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you for having me.
I love IWPR. I love data. I love numbers. I love everything that shows that we're not alone, that we're all in this together. Your data has been so instrumental to so much that Moms Rising and so many other organizations have done. Everything from showing that if we had pay parity, the actual GDP would increase overall, and also showing that we don't have pay parity yet. What are your favorite data points that have come out and that you see people using from IWPR recently?
Thanks so much for that question, Kristen. And I will say, it's like picking your favorite child, right? It's hard for me to pick, one favorite data point, one favorite report from the Institute of Women's Policy Research, because we're looking at so many different aspects of women's lives and thinking about what it means for them day to day, including a lot of the policy proposals that are coming out of this administration and Congress that quite frankly are going to be harmful for us, but also taking a step back and reflecting on, things like the Dobbs decision, for example. And so on June 24th, we had the third anniversary of the Dobbs decision, and IWPR has just released new research looking at the economic costs of abortion-related restrictions. And we found that these restrictions cost the U.S. economy $64 billion annually. And so one might ask, how does that translate in terms of, sort of the real lives of women throughout this country that want bodily autonomy? They want to be able to choose when to have a child and to do so safely. And, this data shows us that, these restrictions are impacting women's labor force participation. We know that if we, did not have these restrictions in place or other policy roadblocks, that we'd see over 500,000 more women in the labor force every year. So not only do these restrictions have a human impact, there are human costs associated with them, there are also large economic costs.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't talk about it, but lack of access to reproductive health care absolutely pushes people out of the labor force. Absolutely, for so many reasons. What other data points? I know that you are also tracking the wage gaps, and that is always important to hear about, to remember, to know what's happening every day around us. And what's happening there?
Yeah, so the wage gap, is also an issue, that women are grappling with. Women are major engines when it comes to the economy. And so, and in a lot of cases, particularly for women of color, women that look like me, that come from my communities, they also tend to be breadwinners of their families. And so anytime we see issues around lack of access to affordable quality childcare, pay equity issues, it does reverberate not only within that woman's broader family, but also in the broader community. And so, yes, IWPR continues to be one of the premier organizations that is looking at how pay equity issues impact women and families. We still know that there are both racial and gender pay equity issues, and Moms Rising has also looked at these issues too. I think another thing to say here as well is that, these issues, women do not lead single issue lives. And so we can talk about issues around pay equity, access to affordable childcare, healthcare issues, and they are also directly linked with, a woman's ability to have bodily autonomy. IWPR, if I could share one more data point as well, we have also looked at the impact of these abortion restrictions on the business community. And, this is research that we did in partnership with Morning Consult and the Center for Reproductive Rights. And we know that young people, people that want to have children within the next 10 years are actually moving out of states with abortion bans. And so again, this is yet another example of how abortion restrictions are impacting both local and national economies. And this has also forced businesses to take a step back and think about being open about their support for abortion restrictions and what kind of policies they actually have in place for their employees when it comes to giving them the space to have access to abortion care, whether it is providing travel stipends and support there, having paid leave to take time off, if you do have to undergo an abortion and want that additional time, but really the whole gambit of issues. And young people, women of reproductive age are paying attention and they're holding their employers accountable as well.
Yeah, because poll after poll shows that the majority of people in the actual United States of America, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, all support a person's ability to choose if, when, and how many children they're going to have, which means access to abortion care is critical. and is very popular when you look at polling. A lot of people are like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm absolutely sure. And I will tell you why. Not only do I know this because I actually read the polls, but I also see this because we've had state level abortion ballot measures in red, purple, and blue states. And guess what? Pretty much anytime abortion is on the ballot, the rights are expanded. Now, there's like an interesting thing that happened recently in Florida where abortion was on the ballot and it did not pass. And people said, oh, it didn't pass. But the passage level is higher than 50% in Florida. And so abortion rights got more vote than Donald Trump in Florida, y'all. So it is popular even in the reddest of states like Florida. And so when we're talking about businesses taking a hit, that is very real. The brain drain is very real. People do not want to live in states with limited or restricted or no abortion access at all. So young people are just, I hear you, moving out. I'm so glad that IWPR is tracking that because it's kind of like common sense when you look at the polls, you look at the ballot measures, but having the actual data to show that what we are seeing is actually true is so important. And that's one of the beautiful things about IWPR. We still have the great or ungreat gaslighter in chief right there, the malignant Cheeto in the Oval Office, just saying the weirdest things, like just totally lying and saying things that are not true. Like you'll be looking at him and there'll be, maybe something that is purple next to him and he'll be like, this is green. And you're like, I see that is actually purple. It is not green. And so having organizations like IWPR that are actually doing their research helps us have not only a reality check, but like that handhold onto reality in a moment when we have the bizarrest situation, I think, on the planet Earth with an absolute lying person in the Oval Office. What other times have you seen recently? I've seen so many where IWPR has been able to do a reality check, be like, wait a minute, you're gaslighting us. That's actually not what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing that up, Kristen. I think also too, IWPR, is an organization that has been around for almost 4 decades. And, we've always prided ourselves, I think, in, sort of focusing on very rigorous, like long-term research. And now this moment is requiring us to take a step back and think through how we can get our research into the hands of the broadest audiences, those that are a part of your membership at Moms Rising, working on the front lines, organizing around these issues. We want to make sure that they have what they need, the evidence that they need to activate when it comes to these issues. And so one example that I can think of, recently is around the tariffs. And I know that you've talked about this both on your show, as well as you've gone out on the road and spoken to people all over the country. But, some of the initial conversations around the tariffs and the impact didn't talk about how women would have to, sort of navigate tariffs, right? Women are the ones that are going to the grocery stores. They're paying for the groceries. They see up close and personal, how their money is working or not working, for the family. And so at IWPR, one of the things that we did was we started talking about the impact of the tariffs on women and families, right? And thinking about it almost in the context of like a woman's pocketbook and, what the tariffs could mean in terms of what she has available to use for her, whatever those expenses are, groceries, clothing, that's also a big part of the conversation too. And so we will continue to keep an eye on the long game. And, we have long-term policy goals that we're pushing for, but we'll also be thinking about this current moment and how we can take our research and leverage opportunities to be plain and clear about the impact of these policy decisions in real time on women and families.
Now, I love your data with extra love, and I know that our listeners and audience know that. And I love following you on social media because you also break down big reports that might take 500 hours to read. And thank you for doing those reports. They're important to do. We actually need to make sure that we are telling the truth. And I love the rigor to telling the truth. But in addition to telling the truth in big reports, you break down some of the summary and the highlights on your social media and on your website. And can you tell people how can they find the information? How can they get involved with IWPR? How can they follow? How can they stay involved? How can they get the truth?
Yeah, so you can follow at IWPR Research on Twitter. They're calling it X these days, the cool kids, on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and then obviously, our website is also accessible, to anyone who would like to see. We have the longer reports, but then we also have things that are shorter and bite size for folks to be able to digest. And then I also want to take a moment too and to flag, we do have a new website that includes a brand new research tool that we have, State Policy Action Lab, or State PAL, and that can be found at statepolicyactionlab.org. And there you can look at over 100 indicators linked to state policy actions and opportunities, in order to advance gender equity. So definitely check that out. And there's even a hotline that you can sign up for if you want additional research. Maybe there's something on the State PAL website that we don't quite yet have available. If you have ideas, use that form and reach out to us. And it's called HER. So we want to hear from you. And we want to continue to make sure that our resources and our data are available to all who need it.
I love this so much because people, if you're getting frustrated looking at what's happening in Washington, D.C., that is not your only avenue to build better opportunities for everyone. You can also build better opportunities at the state level. And now you have the State Policy Action Lab, which I forgot to even ask you about because it's so new, but it's so fantastic. So for frustrated people who are like, this is really hard, I cannot deal with what's happening in Washington, D.C., they can just go there and find ideas for solutions. Or
Yeah.
what's on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So ideas for solutions. We also have a pretty lengthy catalog of, real time, what's happening state by state in terms of policy opportunities across a whole host of issues that we focus on as an organization. Again, all with a focus on advancing gender equity. So please go there and check it out. And again, we are here if you have questions or if there are indicators there that should be, please reach out to us and we'll look into it.
Okay, listeners, now you know why IWPR is my favorite organization. I mean, I have a couple other favorites. So I have got I was thinking of a nest of favorites. Like I've got like a cocoon of favorites of organizations that should be here forever and always because they're just doing spectacular work. But listeners, IWPR is key. It's key to be able to know what's happening with us. It's key to be able to really say, okay, what I'm feeling is real. Like this is real and it's not just me alone. And IWPR does that. So if you are feeling like you want to take action, go to IWPR. If you're feeling lonely and like you're the only one that something is happening to, go to IWPR. I'm sure you can find a study to show that you're not alone. I really loved what you brought up at the beginning, which was we don't have single issues. None of us are single issues. And Audre Lorde, the great famous feminist, said, we don't live single issue lives, so we don't have a single issue struggle. And I see that in IWPR. I see that in Moms Rising. I see that in our movement, showing that, it's us together that's going to make the changes that we need, and us together that is going to be seeing ourselves in the reflection of reality. And the Institute for Women's Policy Research does a spectacular job reflecting and respecting the reality that is true and not that is made up by a malignant Cheeto. So I want to say thank you. I love
Absolutely.
that. And thank you for being on. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wonderful to have you on.
Thank you all for having us. And, I know we're going to close out our time together, but also, want to take the opportunity to give a huge shout out to Kristen and Moms Rising. When you asked me a question about, what inspires me, I mean, your organization, your work is so inspiring, and you've been doing this for a long time. And I want to say thank you to you as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's it for our show today. Thanks so much for tuning in as we tackle the top topics facing our nation in a way that requires the most boring disclaimer in the history of the planet Earth. Here it goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to Moms Rising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week.